Veteran Salute is sponsored by the DeVaughn James Injury Lawyers.
After Pearl Harbor, North High graduate Ernie Smith decided it was his turn to fight for our country. KSN's Katie Tomby tells us he enlisted in the Air Force and was sworn in at Fort Leavenworth on December 7th, 1942, 1 year to the day after Pearl Harbor. It's tonight's Veteran Salute.
Former prisoner of war Ernie Smith says he saw films showing bayonet fighting in the trenches and it scared him. It also impacted how he joined the military because he still wanted to do his part in our fight for freedom.
I didn't want to find myself bayonet fighting in the trenches, so I beat the government to the punch. I enlisted rather than wait to be drafted.
So the Air Force it was. Several aptitude tests later, it was discovered Ernie could understand code, so he was sent to radio operator school in Madison, Wisconsin. Ernie says everyone in the Air Force wanted to be on a plane.
If you could take code at 25 words a minute or more, they wanted you in a ground school somewhere where the messages were transmitted rapidly.
So Ernie says he learned just enough.
When I had accomplished 20 words a minute, I quit.
Ernie would end up on a B-24 crew as head radio operator at Mitchell Field, Long Island, when they finally got their orders.
After we got into air, the pilot was allowed to open his direction envelope, and it said we were going to England.
It was a long flight, and Ernie remembers the pilot taking a snooze after leaving the co-pilot in control.
Our engineer, John W. Pidcock, at a top turret, wondered if those machine guns really worked. So he laid them straight forward like that and he cut loose. Pilot almost bonked his head on top of the plane, coming up trying to find out what was wrong.
As part of the 705th Squadron 446th Bomb Group, Ernie's crew headed out to bomb railroads on May 25th, 1944. Ernie says soon after, one of 4 engines started leaking oil and eventually quit. The pilot decided to head back and tried to avoid anti-aircraft guns, but the crew was still continually shot at. They would lose 2 more engines when they were ordered to bail out.
I had always decided if I had to bail out, I'm not going to worry about the rest of the crew. I'm going to get out of the area immediately. But it didn't work.
Soon after landing in Belgium, Ernie and 3 of his crew were captured by German soldiers. Ernie says he was treated excellently while under the control of the Germans. He remembers a diphtheria plague in December of 1944 that nearly killed him when he says his throat swelled shut.
They were forced to cut a hole in my throat and put a tube in. They actually managed to get a tube from the Germans. And I had a guy holding each arm and a guy holding each foot. And they run a knife in my throat and put I don't know if you can still see the remains of that.
Soon after the war ended and Ernie took a 2-week trip home by ship. A couple months later, Ernie took his discharge and came back to the Wichita area to take advantage of the GI Bill at then Wichita University. He'd eventually joined the Kansas Air National Guard for another 26 years of service. Looking back, Ernie says if he did it again, he'd join the military sooner.
And the fact that I was doing something for the United States of America.
Ernie taught in several Wichita area schools, including Mays High School, for 28 years. He also taught Sunday school at what was United Presbyterian Church. And even after all his military service, Ernie says one of his biggest disappointments was falling short of flying his required 30 missions. Completing 17 missions, Ernie says he fell short paying his debt to the U.S., but he still survived. Here for you in Wichita, Katie Tomby, KSN News 3.
Tonight, we salute Ernie Smith for his service during World War II.
The DeVaughn James Injury Lawyers here with Tech Sergeant Ernie Smith, who proudly served our country in World War II as a radio operator and a top turret gunner on a B-24. On behalf of all of Kansas, thank you so much for your service.
You are entirely welcome, all of you.
Veteran Salute is sponsored by the DeVaughn James Injury Lawyers.